So I was reading that new House of X, and I have a few questions. First question, what the f***? Hey, it's me, Aaron, this is Comic Class, you all know the deal. Listen, this week on Comic Class, we were going to talk about Absolute Carnage #1. But then I read House of X #2, and I said, sorry 90s kids, Red Angry Spider-Man is going to have to wait. We have way more important things to discuss about this book I've already talked about 3 times. Okay, so you remember how a couple weeks ago, we made a video talking about all the teased X-Men books that are coming up? And I said, yeah, you should never really form theories on what Jonathan Hickman is going to do, because Jonathan Hickman is always going to surprise you. No one knows what Jonathan Hickman has planned, except for Jonathan Hickman, and then I proceeded to make a bunch of theories about what Jonathan Hickman might have planned. And then literally like the next day afterwards, House of X #1 came out, and I read it, and I came in here and I said, yep, I said you should never make theories because all my theories were wrong. So here's a bunch of brand new theories. House of X #2 has now come out, and we now know what has happened to this world. I was so off. I was so wrong. Listen, I don't like making clickbaity titles for my YouTube videos, but I feel like I have to title this one, I was so wrong. Like, that is just the title of this video. Because, wow, I came in here, I was like, alright, this could be like some kind of a pod people thing, because you got like Cyclops, and you got Miss Marvel, and they look younger than they used to, and they look different than they used to, and they're coming out of these big pods, and you got Charles Xavier, who he's just walking around now with this mini Cerebro on his head at all times, and wow, he really looks like the Maker, this other character that Jonathan Hickman really made popular, and Jonathan Hickman has a big love for this big, super crazy villain. So could it be that they're somehow tied together in one way, shape, or another, and oh man, they're now kind of working with the villains, and they've gone down the darker path? What is happening with all these villains teaming up with the heroes in this new world? And oh my god, time travel! But not like normal time travel! It is reincarnation time travel! Okay, let's start with this. This thing begins with Moira McTaggart, which that's not her actual name, was the name that most X-Men fans know her by, but McTaggart was her married name. She is now going back to her maiden name of Moira Kinrose, and this thing starts off by just going, alright, she lived this normal life, she got sick when she was young, then she made a miraculous recovery and no one knows why, and then she just lived out a normal life, got married, had children, had grandchildren, passed away, just like a normal human existence. And I looked at that and I went, that's a very kind of downplayed start to a Jonathan Hickman book. That's a very normal and average opening to a series, and it's not what I would come to expect from Jonathan Hickman. And then you turn the page and it says, Moira's second life began in utero, and I went, there's the Jonathan Hickman opening I was waiting for. And it reveals that Moira basically is a mutant. She had never been a mutant before. She had always been kind of just the X-Men's human science buddy. And she had just been there to help out the mutants. It's now revealed, yes, she was indeed a mutant. But her mutant power is that when she dies, she Groundhog Days. She relives her entire existence, like from the point of being in the mother's womb. And she even like makes a comment about how it's like, yeah, you'd think that would be terrifying, but no, it's actually kind of comforting in there, which again, it's one of those just weird things that you wouldn't expect someone to say, but makes perfect sense within a Jonathan Hickman storyline. And then it talks about how she had to basically relive her entire life. Even though she had the knowledge of her entire past life, she had to walk through this existence just pretending to be a baby, just pretending to be a small child. And everybody was like, oh my goodness, she's learned to talk so quickly and learned to walk so quickly. And Moira's just like, yeah, I kind of wish I could do it a little bit faster, but if I did too fast, you guys would freak out about this. And in her second life, she hears about Charles Xavier. She sees Charles Xavier talking about being a mutant, and she thinks, oh my goodness, maybe I'm a mutant too. I have to board a plane, I have to go to America, I have to find Charles Xavier. She gets on that plane, she goes over to America, the plane crashes, third life begins, all the way back at the start. And now she goes, she finds Charles Xavier, she's talking to him about mutants, and as she discusses this with him, she's going, okay, listen, I don't know if I can do this again. She doesn't ever actually say this out loud, but this book makes you realize this has to be awful. We all saw Groundhog's Day. We know how terrible it would be just to live one day over and over and over again. She has to go back to being a baby. Every time that she dies, she has years and years every single time that she dies, in which she just has to go through just the exact same routine every single time before she can even try to do anything different. Because you can't just have a baby running out there trying to change the world. She's gotta go like, all right, gotta go through stupid freaking preschool all over again. It would drive anyone mad. So she starts studying up on mutants, and she finds the cure for mutants. But then, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants finds her. And you've got Mystique, and you've got Destiny there, and Destiny, who has the power to see the future, she starts reading Moira, and she's telling her, okay, there's something different about you. You have this weird ability where you're just looping around over and over and over again. I can't let you create this cure. Because even if you just want to create this cure just for yourself, just use this one time just on yourself so that way you don't have to keep reincarnating over and over and over again. I know how humans work. They're going to find that cure. They're going to use that on all of us. We're not safe, so you can't ever make this. So we're going to kill you now, so you can go back and relive this all over again, knowing that you cannot make this cure, knowing that you have to live out this existence, and you can't undo this. So she even tells her, like, if you come back in the next life and you think, well, I have to get rid of her, so that way I can be free to go and do this, I can see the future. I'll be able to see you coming for me in that next life, and I'll instantly know all the stuff that I know right now, and I'll be able to stop you. So really, you're just at an impasse. I can easily kill you anytime that I want. If you ever try and come for me, and if you ever try and create this cure, I will come for you. So you just now have to keep living this life over and over again. You can never create that cure. So that's terrifying. Her one way out of this, Destiny just came in there and just told her, nah, taking that away from you. Just taking that up. You can never use that, ever. And so she just gets scorched by Pyro, reawakens, fourth life, let's go. And this life, she just said, you know what? This time, I'm gonna work side by side with the mutants. I'm gonna work side by side with the mutants. I'm gonna work with Charles Xavier. And this existence kind of carries on the life that we knew Moira McTaggart to have. We knew that she was going to live out this specific existence, and we watch her as they kind of create this entire world together. They create like the families of the X-Men. I don't mean they create like the world that they create at the end of this book. I mean worlds as in like the X-Men world, the X-Men community. They helped create the original X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men, the ones that came later on, the like Wolverine, Colossus, and them. And then it even goes into, and I've mentioned this, how in the original House of X, they just skip all that stuff that happened after the Grant Morrison run. And I kept talking about how Jonathan Hickman kind of reminds me of the modern day Grant Morrison, which is a weird sentence considering that Grant Morrison is still here, but he kind of continues to carry that torch that Grant Morrison started on the X-Men series. And it didn't surprise me at all that when he got his hands on this book, he was going to show everyone, yeah, I have a love for what Grant Morrison was doing, I want to continue what Grant Morrison was doing. But he was coming in here and talking about the Grant Morrison stuff like nothing happened after that. And that book was over 10 years ago. And we've had all these other crazy stories that happened during that. There was a moment in which it is showing all the stuff that Moira has done and says, oh, I was with them during the beginning, during the hate and feared era. I was with them during the Lost Decade. And it shows the X-Men versus Avengers storyline. It shows the Phoenix Five in there. And I looked at that and I just thought that was him throwing shade. I thought that was him just throwing down and just pointing to everybody who came after Grant Morrison and said, he created something great, you all messed it up, I'm not touching anything you did. This is now the Lost Decade, that's all I'm mentioning, we are not touching this. As this story goes along, it's revealed, Lost Decade has a different meaning. I will get to that in a second, but again, I'm sorry that at the moment I am just coming in here and I'm just reciting what this book has done, because I want you guys to go out there and read this. And normally when I want you to read a book, I don't come in here and I spoil stuff. However, I know that when it comes to a Jonathan Hickman book, I could tell you everything that happens in the book, line for line. It still wouldn't spoil the experience. It still wouldn't change anything around. So anyway, back to timeline number 4. At the end of this, after she has basically lived out the life that we all know, the Sentinels come and they kill her and they kill Charles and they kill all the other mutants. So then she starts life 5. And she decides, I'm tired of playing around. I'm gonna go straight to Charles Xavier and I'm just gonna tell him, listen, read my mind, this is everything that's gone down. And so Charles Xavier just decides, I'm going to split the mutants off from the rest of humans. We're going to build this perfect society. We have this utopia right here. And then the Sentinels still come and destroy all of them. So now we're on timeline number 6. And in timeline number 6, Moira just goes, alright, I thought I was done messing around. Now I have to be even more proactive in this. So she decides she's just going to hunt down everyone who had something to do with the Sentinels. So she decides, screw studying science. I already got all the knowledge of science I need. I'm going to study being a soldier. I'm going to become the perfect elite soldier, and I'm going to go and hunt down all the Trask. I'm going to hunt down every single person who touched a Sentinel in a past timeline. I'm going to make sure the Sentinels never come to exist. But then they reveal that this is basically Terminator rules, where yeah, you can stop Judgment Day, but you really just delay it. It's still gonna come eventually. And it reveals, yeah, the Sentinels kind of just start building themselves. They don't say this right now, but later on in the issue, when you get this giant timeline, which is just crazy to look at in and of itself, but you get this giant timeline, and it basically just says, okay, there's a master mold program. There's some secret master mold base. So it's like, Jesus, even when she takes out the people who create the Sentinels just build themselves! How are they going to stop this? And that really ties back into what we wanted to talk about last week, but sadly I was sick last week, so we didn't get to make a video for that. But Power of X, number 1 came out, and Power of X is talking about the future, like hundreds of years in the future. And yeah, man, Jonathan Hickman, he loves coming up with bat crap crazy futures. This is one of the best ones he's made. And part of the reason it's so incredibly great is something that I haven't been able to mention yet in any of the other videos that I put together about this so far. But one thing that he has been doing in every single one of these issues is he's had these dossiers coming. That just basically give you a description of everything that's happening. And I've loved that because in many other Jonathan Hickman things, he'll just kind of throw you right into the deep end. And just go, I don't know, just figure it out from the context. Like, you're talking about space lobsters and crap in here. I don't know what the context of any of this is. He comes in here, he gives you context. But it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like he's cheating by just coming in here and just going, well, here's the exact thing that I'm talking about. Because they frame it like you're reading through historical documents, which gives this entire event this very ominous feeling. This feeling of, I can't change any of this. And all the weird stuff you're describing has happened. Everything that's going down, everything that you were talking about, it's all happened. So yeah, it really does add to this without making it feel like, oh, I'm just sitting here reading the Cliff Notes version of all this. It's great. I love how they've been able to do all of this stuff. But yeah, in the Power of X series, when it's taking place in the future, you see the robots just rose up. And they just start fighting back against the mutants. All this time, we've been thinking to ourselves, okay, it's going to come down to the humans versus the mutants. That's how it's always going to happen. Jonathan Hickman came in here and was like, humans are done. They're gone. But the stuff they create, that remains. And it keeps building itself over and over and over again. I'm really I know this is an X-Men storyline, and I know I'm an Avengers fan. I should just sit over here and just like let the X-Men fans have their moment. I'm really hoping Ultron gets tied into this in some way, shape, or form. Because the reason why Ultron is my favorite supervillain of all time is that I love how he always feels like this villain who's going to return. No matter what. You could take out that version of Ultron, another version of Ultron will pop up. You could take out every version of Ultron on Earth. It's going to turn out he had a version just hiding in space, just waiting for the day. And the way that he has described the Sentinels in here, it makes me go, that's totally some Ultron 101 right there. So I'm not saying he's going to like maybe bring Ultron in here, but what I am saying is he's taking the stuff that I really like about Ultron and he's turning it into the Sentinels. But he's still giving the Sentinels their own flavor because the Sentinels have risen up to create their own culture. Like they have just a robot society in there. And it almost, okay, this is going to be a very weird way to put this, but it almost seems peaceful. And when I say that, I know it sounds terrible because they're murdering mutants. But that's what makes it so creepy. Because you see like Nimrod Prime, you see like the leader of all the Sentinels in Power of X. He was going up to this mutant who they captured. And he was like, oh, you poor thing. Oh, I'm so sorry for everything that you've been through. Oh, yes, and I just want you to know, we apologize for this. Also, I'm going to need to dissolve you in a vat of nanotech acid so we can just basically take all the pieces of the data out of your brain and then use that against the mutants. But listen, I just want you to know, it's important to me that you know that we're cool, right? on this, it makes them so much scarier. And I love how they've been able to frame that. It'd almost be like if you just played through all those Mega Man games, and when you got to the final Mega Man game, it got revealed, oh yeah, they've actually been enslaving all the humans behind the scenes. You didn't know any of that stuff. You just thought it was the little blue bomber running around, jumping up and screaming whenever he jumped up and pointing his gun at stuff. No, he's fighting against humans the entire time. Dr. Light is the traitor to his kind. Yeah, it's so weird looking at how he framed the Sentinels in here. So I'm all over the place in this video, but man, I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm enjoying this series. What timeline were we on? Okay, so we're now on timeline 7, or so we think. Asterisk, I'll come back to that later. So on timeline 7, she decides, alright, I've tried teaming up with Charles Xavier. I've tried being the one who stops the robot apocalypse. I can't do it on my own, and Charles Xavier ain't gonna help me with it. Time to go to the bad guy's side. And she teams up with Magneto, and she tries to lead this big revolt against the humans alongside Magneto, but Magneto ends up dying to the forces of the humans, and she ends up getting captured, and she ends up dying in prison, and then we start timeline number 8. Again, asterisk, I'll get back to that later. And this one she goes, alright, time for the big guns. Time for my last resort. The one option I have not tried yet. She goes to Apocalypse. And she just goes, alright, you know what? I've tried working alongside the humans. I've tried fighting the humans. Let's just try and make mutants win. Let's just try that. Let's try this whole survival of the fittest thing. So she teams up with Apocalypse, and she ends up wiping out some of the humans. But then you see there is some kind of a revolt. Something is fighting back against them. You don't quite know what it is. It's probably more robots, knowing where this storyline's going on. And here's the thing, in all the other ones, you found out where she died. But in this one, at the end of the series, at the end of this issue, I should say, there's a big timeline. There's this big timeline that charts out every single major point in her life along every single one of these timelines. In this one, it says Apocalypse War begins, and then the timeline just continues all the way off the panel. Except that it continues with like little dash marks across the panel, and I'm like, alright, does that mean that she's not alive anymore, but that timeline continued on? What are we talking about in this one? I'm not quite sure how this is working exactly. Okay, I'm a little bit confused on this one. So yeah, that just raised a bunch of questions. I have no theories on that one at all, but it never feels like Jonathan Hickman ever does anything just because it might be cool. It feels like even if he can't put it on the page, he's got some kind of a logic in his head behind it. So I can't help but think about the fact that out of all these timelines, this and the next timeline are the only ones that don't end exactly. They keep going on in one way or another, and I'm very intrigued to see what that could possibly mean. But that brings us into the final timeline, which is the 10th timeline, and by the way, it's important to note that when she was killed by Destiny, Destiny mentioned, oh yes, I see many more timelines, but not infinite. Maybe like 10, I'd say. So it makes you think, okay, so you were like guessing 10 or 11. Does that mean that this is the final timeline? Does it mean that we have one more? Because you guys might be thinking, well, this is only the 9th timeline that you've described. Yeah, remember that big map that I put at the end, that I said they put at the end of this issue? It tells you every single one of these timelines, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's no 6 in there. And in this final timeline, she decides, alright, new strategy. Let's figure out a way to make all this work, some way or another. Let's figure out a way to basically have mutants just rise up and just become the dominant species, but without a war. They don't actually say that, but based on what we've seen in the previous House of X issue, it does kind of make you think, alright, is that what you meant in here? I don't know what your plan is in all this. I have no theories. I got nothing. Yeah, I had no idea what Moira could have planned for this potential final timeline, and I say potential final timeline because I had one big question left over. I had one big puzzle piece that wasn't fitting in there just right, and that's when I noticed, as I said, that there was that missing timeline in there. Because, as we said, every single time that Moira died, she went back, she was reincarnated, and this entire process just started all over again for her. But Moira already died in the comics, like a while back. She died when Moira Island was attacked. She died in basically the result of its destruction. And I kept looking at that going, but so that doesn't match up with any of these timelines in here. That doesn't fit with any of this stuff that we're seeing in here. And that's when I realized, oh, there's a timeline that we're not seeing in here. And it's the timeline right before she goes, all right, time to go down the dark path. So could the comics that we have been reading up to this point have been that timeline? Could that have been the thing that we had been following? Or could this all be leading up to Moira eventually saying, okay, none of this has worked. Let's just see if I do this. If that's the thing that will get the X-Men to be okay. If that will get everything to work out for the mutants. And that is the final timeline. The comics that we have always been reading are the final timeline. I don't know about that. And even if that is what happens, it raises a couple questions. And one of those questions is, so if the final timeline is the comics that we've been reading, that still means that Moira had to be reincarnated after she died, meaning that she basically is now, for the entire existence of eternity, she's going to have to just live out that exact same life over and over and over again. She's just going to have to keep repeating that one existence until infinity. Just forever and ever and ever. And that's madness. Like, you can't imagine the kind of torture that would be for her. That is a horrendous thought, that she would have to live through that in order for us to have the universe that we've had. Or, there's another option in here. When you look at the timeline at the end of this book, and you look at the timeline that we're on right now for the House of X timeline, there's a lot of big events along that timeline. Like I said, Jonathan Hickman, he plans everything out. There's all these moments in there, like when Moira McTaggart got married, when she met Professor X, when she had her child, Proteus, which, yeah, I remember 2 issues ago, or 2 weeks ago, when House of X #1 came out, and it listed off all the Omega level mutants in there, and it listed Proteus on there. I remember looking at that going, isn't Proteus dead? I mean, I remember that they brought him back, but I thought that they already took care of him again. I didn't think that he was still around. Okay, that's a little bit interesting on there. Sure, whatever, I guess. Yeah, I thought they were just kind of mentioning like, yeah, he was, but you know, he's not here anymore. No, new timeline. He's here now. He's back. He's in this. But who knows what exactly is happening with Proteus in this timeline? Who knows what's happening with any of these characters in this timeline? I'll get to that in just a moment. But it keeps going along, and then it gets up to what happened on Genosha, what happened in Grant Morrison's run when Genosha got wiped out. And then right after that, it mentions Moira McTaggart faked her own death. They used a Shi'ar golem to fake her own death, and I keep looking at that going, is that supposed to be what happened when she died in the comics? The death that we all thought she had in the timeline that we thought we were on? Are you now saying that that wasn't actually a death? That that was a fake death? And the timeline that we've been in was the same up until, like, now? I have several questions about that, because if you did indeed change everything immediately right after the Grant Morrison run, like everything, so House of X, all this stuff with the Bendis run on there, all that stuff didn't happen at all. Avengers vs. X-Men, none of that stuff happened. The Phoenix 5, gone, never happened at all. Then why did she have to fake her own death in this timeline? If I had to take a guess, and I know that I said that you should never take a guess at what Jonathan Hickman is going to do on the book, because you're always going to be proven wrong. I've been proven wrong twice already this month alone. But if I had to take a guess, because this is going to be a boring video if I don't at least do that once, I would say, no, this is not the same timeline we've been on. This is not some situation where she had to fake her death to make it seem like the timeline was still lining up. I think they have something else planned for Moira. Because an issue ago in House of X #1, they gave this big map of the living island of Krakoa, the island where all the X-Men and all the mutants are living on, and they said, on this island, there's a black spot. and it's basically a tumor growing on Krakoa. And within that black spot, no one knows what's going on. Even the living island of Krakoa itself doesn't know what is happening within its own body in that particular spot. I have a feeling they had to fake Moira's death so she could move to that black spot and start organizing all the stuff that we've been seeing happening within House of X. Of course, then again, I could be completely wrong, but I don't think that this is still the timeline we've been reading. It really does feel like every single thing that has happened in the X-Men books after the Grant Morrison run, gone. Completely different. None of that stuff is going to line up at all. It is all 100% different. And again, this wasn't like one writer's run on a book. This wasn't like just one event that we just decided to negate out of existence. No. This is over 10 years of books just gone. And we don't know what has been happening in that time. And when you look at all the stuff from the previous issue and all the questions that we had, it makes sense that this is now 100% a different timeline at this point. Scott Summers, he ain't acting like the Scott Summers that we've seen over the past 10 years. Scott Summers changed dramatically after the House of M event. House of M never happened now. House of M that's gone. That wasn't a thing that happened. Scott Summers, completely different now because he has been living in a different timeline for the past 10 years. Jean Grey, why is Jean Grey still called Marvel Girl? Why is she dressing completely differently and acting very differently from the Jean Grey that we just saw a couple months ago? Because this kind of is a different Jean Grey. We've been seeing a Jean Grey who has lived a completely different existence for 10 freaking years now at this point. Yeah, it is shocking. And it also explains things like, okay, Wolverine just came back from the dead. It's kind of shocking that one of the most popular X-Men of all time just came back from the dead. You're not going to give him his own series now? Because the Wolverine that we got now, who even knows who that guy is? Who even knows what he's up to? And I'm really wondering how this is going to affect some of the other books that Wolverine is in. Wolverine's part of that Savage Avengers team. What's going to happen over there? What's he going to do in that series now? Yeah, I have several questions about what's going to happen, and I have no answers, no theories, no nothing. And I love it. This is essentially the biggest reset button that I have ever seen Marvel do. Like, a lot of people might be looking at this and going, well, you know, it's not bigger than, like, say, One More Day, where they undid the Spider-Man Mary Jane marriage. They chickened out on that thing so hard because they came in here and they said, yeah, they didn't get married, but they still lived together during that entire time, and they still literally did every single thing that they did during their marriage, just in this timeline where they didn't get married, and, you know, so everything was essentially the same. Nothing is essentially the same now. I mean, think about every major event that has happened to the X-Men over the past couple of years. Didn't happen. None of that stuff went down anymore. I mentioned earlier on how they had that moment in which they referred to all that stuff with, like, say, Avengers vs. X-Men, House of M, all that stuff. They referred to it as the Lost Decade. And I looked at that and I just went, oh, wow, that's kind of him just throwing shade at everything that's been happening to the X-Men over the past 10 years. Wow, that's kind of him just telling the world how much he disliked that. You read this at the end now and you see where the timeline changes dramatically and you go, oh no, you mean Lost Decade, because everything up to that point was the same. And now none of that stuff happened. None of it. All completely different. So yeah, this has got me excited. This has got me really intrigued. And I'll admit, I'm a little bit hesitant in there as well. I know that I'm coming in here being super excited, but there is just a little bit in the voice in the back of my mind just going, yeah, but isn't this kind of what they're doing over at DC? And you've mentioned they have problems with them doing that over at DC. Yeah, I've mentioned before, I have a problem with the fact that DC doesn't really have any sense of continuity anymore, because every writer over there is allowed to just do whatever they want to do, but then that causes some writers to write stuff that negates stuff that other writers are currently doing, and it causes them to wreck plans that other writers might have for future storylines, and it just kind of seems like when everything can happen, then nothing matters and nothing makes sense, and who cares what you do when you can just come in here and rewrite stuff constantly. This is not that. I do have that voice in the back of my head saying it could maybe become that, because you've got other X-Men storylines that are important to other characters and their progression and where these characters are right now in their storyline. So if you negate all that stuff, then that means that didn't really happen to these characters, so that would change their storylines going on. but honestly, what we have right now is so vague that all that stuff could still have happened for those other characters in some way that still leads up to that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if House of M never happened, House of M just, no, that went down. No, that went down at all. That doesn't really affect anyone in the modern day and age of comics outside of the X-Men. Heck, it barely even still affects the X-Men in any way, shape, or form. But, you know, doesn't really affect Spider-Man. Spider-Man never brings up all the stuff that happened in House of M. That never comes up. Iron Man never mentioned it. Captain America never mentioned it. So it's not really important to any of their storylines. Or, you know, you think about the stuff that happened with, like, say, Utopia, when the X-Men had to split off on their own little island there. Wow, the X-Men really love splitting off on their own little islands. Nobody else outside the X-Men ever really brings that up. That doesn't really affect any of them. It's almost like all those storylines existed on an island. Even the stuff that did directly tie into the other characters. Like, say, Avengers vs. X-Men. I can't remember the last time that an Avenger actually mentioned anything that happened during Avengers vs. X-Men. I can't remember any of that stuff ever actually coming up. I mean, the Inhumans might mention it, that they had this big war with the X-Men, except the Inhumans just picked up and left. They're all gone. Nobody's talking about the Inhumans anymore, so that's not really going to come up at all. Really, I'm trying. The only thing that I can think of is what's going to happen to Savage Avengers. Because that's the only book that I can point to right now and go, yeah, that's where an X-Men is, that's not an X-Men book. But I'm not reading that book. That affects me in no way, shape, or form. So, okay. Cool. Yeah, that's really like the only thing that I can point to and be like, okay, well, I have a question about that. Oh, never mind. It also will not affect me. Yeah, this is one of those things where you can come in here, you can hit the reset button on the X-Men that hard, and it's really only going to affect the X-Men. It's really only going to mess with their own books, and they canceled all their books. So that way, they could lead into all these new X-Men books taking place in this bold new world. So they kind of got their bases covered on that one. It kind of doesn't really affect anything that anybody else is really doing all that much. I mean, Spider-Man and Venom are dealing with Carnage, as I mentioned at the beginning of this issue. That has nothing to do with the X-Men. That doesn't tie into them in any way, shape, or form. The Avengers, they've got this whole thing going on with Ghost Rider. That doesn't have anything to do with the X-Men. Are the Avengers going to mention that they used to have a team-up team with them called the Uncanny Avengers? No? That's just never going to come up again? Cool. Alright, that's fine. That doesn't matter to the Avengers books at all. Yeah, it really feels like out of all the big, massive continuity changes that they have ever done to a team, this one seems the safest. Which is shocking because it's also like the largest. It's also like the biggest one I've ever seen. And now that I know that the past 10 years of the X-Men have completely changed, it's making me look at all those upcoming books in a completely different way. It's making me look at like the fact that Emma Frost runs a legitimate business called the Hellfire Organization, and I'm looking at that going, oh man, remember how Emma Frost kind of had all this back and forth between being a hero and being a villain, and we're assuming that a lot of that stuff still happened because it started in the Morrison run, but a lot of that stuff, it really got carried on in like the Fraction run and the Bendis run. What if now none of that stuff really happened past the Morrison run? What if she just teamed up with the X-Men a little bit there, and then she basically just backed out and went, you know what, maybe you guys got a whole point about being good, but I'm going to return to the Hellfire Club. We're going to change around how we do things just a little bit. So, what's her whole history like now? And then you look at, like, say, Rogue and Gambit. They're back in their old uniforms. Did they still get married? Are they still together? Did you just completely undo that Mr. and Mrs. X series? Because that's a shame, it was really darn good. But I guess I can't really wag a finger that much because everything has been undone. Yeah, it makes me look at the villains who are in here. Like, a lot of people kept asking me about the fact that Vulcan is now on the X-Men team, and they're going, yeah, but Vulcan died, and he's never come back. How did he come back? When is he going to come back? Is he coming back in this particular storyline? Sort of, because we're in a different timeline, meaning he now never died. So he's just here now. Okay then, or Apocalypse. That means that the reason why Apocalypse is teaming up with the X-Men, I kept looking at that and being like, okay, well, maybe they're being united by a common foe. No. Now that I've read House of X #1, seems like the X-Men are going down a darker path. maybe Apocalypse looked at them basically saying, listen, the mutants, we're going to rise up eventually, we're going to overtake society eventually. Let's just all kind of accept that's going to happen. Maybe Apocalypse looked at them and just went, oh, you know what? I've been trying to like wipe out the humans, but you guys just want to like sit and wait on it. I guess we can all do that. Maybe instead they spent the last 10 years basically just going up to Apocalypse going, listen, man, let's just work together on this. Let's just come together on this thing. No, I'm Apocalypse. I'm not going to do that. Listen, I'm going to keep coming to you for like 10 years now, just making the same speech over and over again. And maybe eventually, after they did that over and over again, eventually Apocalypse was like, oh, I think I see your point now. This Apocalypse might be joining the good guys because he's a good guy? Who knows? And I kept talking about like the whole thing with Betsy Braddock and Psylocke and how Betsy Braddock is now Captain Britain. I kept looking at that like, oh, okay, so after they got separated from each other, Betsy Braddock, she's now filling in for her brother's role and everything. I'm now looking back at this going, we don't even know when they separated anymore. I mean, clearly they were still together at one point in time, or maybe she really changed this timeline a whole lot in here, who knows. But maybe they worked together at some point, but instead of just separating and becoming two different people, you know, a couple months ago, it now happened a decade ago. So now you've got Psylocke in there, and she's got her own completely different identity existing within this reality. It's raising so many questions, and it makes me really want to read all these upcoming books. I want answers to all these upcoming books. I am not even an X-Men fan. I'll admit that. I'll say that right here and now. Yeah, when I was a kid, all my friends were X-Men fans, and I was that one guy over there like, yeah, but the Avengers have a guy with a bow and arrow, he's really cool. Yeah, I was the one kid who liked the Avengers when everyone was loving that X-Men cartoon. When everyone was obsessing over that X-Men cartoon, I was like, that's nice and all, I like these books over here. This is like the first time in my entire life that I have looked at X-Men books going, oh my god, I'm gonna have to read all of them. I'm gonna have to read all those books. And you guys know me, I trade wait. I wait for this stuff to be done, to be collected, to be cheap. I can't do that with this. I'm gonna have to read these things, at least the first issue, as soon as they all come out. And I'm really excited about it. I really wanna know what this new untold world for the X-Men is going to be about. What the history of all these characters has now been changed around to become. It's almost like getting the Ultimate Universe back. Except I don't want the Ultimate Universe back. Yeah, the Ultimate Universe, it had its time. It came, it went, that's fine. You can say goodbye to that. But the X-Men have needed a shock to their system for years. For a long time. The X-Men have needed something big, and this is one of the boldest moves that I have ever seen one of the two big comic book companies do. It is alarming how bold of a move this is, and I have to applaud them for that. And it's paying off. Everyone is talking about this. I expected so many people to be pissed off at this. I expected so many people online to be coming in here and saying, I hate that they took everything that I just read and said that didn't actually happen. I haven't seen anybody say that. I've only seen people excited about this. I think everybody out there needed them to come in here and do something this shocking with the X-Men, and I'm so happy about this. Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what's going to go down, because you know you can't put this genie back in the bottle. You can't just like shove it back in there, because, as I mentioned, there is that chance that, oh, the next timeline is just going to be more living out the life that we already knew, giving us those old comics back over and over and over again, so that way it doesn't change anything with the timeline and we get everything back the way that was. But then I started thinking about, it's not like House of X and Power of X is it. It's not like we're getting these two series with this one storyline and this one concept and this one premise behind it, and that's all leading up to an end, and then it's back to business as usual with the X-Men. And it's all just returning to the way that was. Just, bam, this is one like weird little side story that we're doing with the X-Men, our own little House of X alternate reality storyline, and then at the end of this, we go back to normal, everything's fine. No, at the end of this, we get all those new X-Men books set inside this new universe that has been created for the X-Men. So, either those are going to go on for a while, and then they're going to negate it all by going back and just having more just do the exact same existence that we had for years and years and years, and everything's just going to be the same as usual, meaning that we're going to have who knows how many issues, how many years of these particular series that gets undone later on in the future. Or we're just done with that whole timeline. We're just done with everything that happened to the X-Men over the past 10 years. Just gone. Gone. Terrigen Mist, House of M, that weird vaccine, Cyclops losing his eye, Cyclops going evil and dying and coming back and all that stuff. Yeah, gone. Just done with. And what makes that so crazy is it makes me look at Matthew Rosenberg's run on the X-Men, the guy who was writing the X-Men right before this, and it makes me look at that and go, oh my god, he wrote the last X-Men story of that particular universe, of the universe that we have been reading about for those past 10 years, everything from Grant Morrison to the present. He ended it. That was the end of it. And that's crazy to think that we actually saw that happen. And none of us even knew it was happening while it was happening. So, yeah, to sum up, between House of X number 1 and 2 and Power of X number 1, we're only 3 issues into this thing. We're like a fourth or something into this book. We are not even at the halfway point in this thing. And I am already more excited about what is coming up for the X-Men than I have been for anything in comics, period. Hold on, I'm going through the mental Rolodex right now. I was really excited about War of the Realms, and it was really good, but I'm more excited for this. Going back further. Rebirth! Not since Rebirth over at DC have I been this excited about something. And honestly, again, we still have so much space to grow on this. We still have so many things coming up on this. We don't even know how Power of X is going to tie into all this, because Moira did all this stuff to try and prevent the robot apocalypse future, and we've now seen, yeah, that's still kind of gonna happen in all this. So how does that tie into this? Because it's not like Moira is going to learn, oh geez, I guess the only way to truly undo this is to go back and just create that old continuity. As I said, we got 6 freaking X-Men books coming out of this that are going to go on for years after this. You're not going to go back and undo that after all that's done? Or maybe you will. I don't know what Hickman has planned, but it's going to be good. The excitement that I have gotten out of these first 3 issues of this entire event have brought me more joy in comics than anything that I have read in so long that the rest of this event could just be garbage. It could be awful. It could be terrible. It could crash and burn almost immediately. I will never forget the adrenaline rush that I have gotten from reading these first 3 issues. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought about House of X number 2, about Power of X number 1, about this big crazy reveal about what the story is actually about. You can also reach me on Twitter and Twitch at Professor Thorgy, and I can't guarantee how many more times we're going to come in here and talk about these House of X and Power of X issues, because I was not planning on coming in here and talking about issue number 2. But that was some damn good X-Men. And I will come in here and talk about some damn good X-Men. So if we get another issue like this, then we will probably come in here and talk about, but we will definitely talk about this entire thing when it is all wrapped up. When everything is said and done, I will come in here and I will make a video talking about all these issues together. Of course, we're going to talk about all those new X-Men books when they all come out. We're going to talk about all that stuff. So if you want to see any of that, make sure that you click that subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumb up, do all that stuff that you know you got to do on YouTube, because YouTube doesn't know how YouTube works. And also, we will be talking about that Absolute Carnage thing, but we're going to do it as a Patreon video. I'm going to save it just for the patrons. So if you want to just donate $1 a month to see our free Patreon monthly video, then go ahead and follow the link that comes up here in a moment. I am tired because I have not been this excited in a while, and it's kind of tuckered me out. So I'm just going to say goodbye for right now, and I might just go and study that timeline some more and try and start putting giant strings all over my walls, trying to connect where all these plot lines could go. And then I will be proven to be wrong about all of them in the very next week. Bye, everyone.